The fundamental point I want to emphasize in this very brief discussion is that there is not one way in which Judaism supports contemporary claims to the Holy Land or portions of it. The belief in the ultimate restoration of the Jews to the Holy Land is shared by all streams of Orthodox Jewry. How and when Jewish control is to be realized is subject to dispute. Christian views come next. Christian attitudes towards the land of Israel are also diverse and contradictory. Christianity does refer to Terra Sanctus, or Holy Land, but in reality, Christians have focused on the holy places within Palestine. There's nothing comparable in Christianity to the Jewish idea of the holiness of the entire Promised Land. Rather, Christians are interested primarily in those sites associated with Jesus and mentioned in the New Testament. In addition, for much of Christian history, there has been an attempt to disassociate the land from Jews. This is rooted in the Christian doctrine of supersessionism, or as it is sometimes called, fulfillment or replacement theology. According to this view, the covenant of the Old Testament was replaced by the new Christian covenant, and the children of Israel were supplanted as God's chosen people by the new Christian church of the New Testament. There are many possibilities and nuances within this conception. The most severe is that the Old Covenant is null and void. The Jews sinned, particularly in rejecting Jesus as the Messiah, and forfeited their covenantal status. As a consequence, whatever national rights Jews once had to the Holy Land, their claims have lapsed, have ended. As one might expect, this religious tradition of approximately 2,000 years has many variants. For purposes of our discussion today, I'll describe positions at the two extremes. At the one end of the spectrum are primarily Palestinian Arab Christians, adherents to what they call liberation theology. They claim God is universal and no longer has a special relationship with those people who have been called Jews. According to liberation theology, Jews were not only replaced by Christians, but actually disappeared as actors in human history. The so-called Jews who have come to rule in Palestine in the modern period do so on false premises and at the expense of the natives, that is, the Palestinians. In this curious and ironic way, God, who is universal and disconnected from Jews or any particular nationalism, becomes the supporter of Palestinian nationalism and its political claims. The other extreme are particularly Protestant evangelical groups. These groups believe Jews must play a role in history that will culminate in the imminent coming of the Messiah. According to this view, it is essential that Jews are a real people and that they continue to act in history. They must return to the Holy Land to take part in the great battle at Armageddon, where the Antichrist will be defeated by the Messiah. This view derives from dispensationalism, a Christian view that considers Jews an authentic historical entity. These Christians find inspiration in the book of Revelations of the New Testament and in the view that the fulfillment of God's covenant with Israel has been postponed until the end of history. Unlike the Arab liberation theologians, these evangelical Christians do not see God's promises to the Jews as terminated or replaced. Those who hold to this understanding may be defined as Christian Zionists. They have become significant supporters of the State of Israel in its conflict with the Arabs in Palestine. Someplace in the middle between these two extremes, Arab-Palestinian liberation theology and evangelical Christian Zionism, is a view expressed in 2002 in a document entitled A Sacred Obligation. This document was formulated by moderate Christians who seek accommodation with Jews and at the same time have sympathy for the Arab position. Among its important clauses, we find that 1. God's covenant with the Jewish people endures forever and thereby denies supersessionism. 2. Judaism is considered to be a living modern faith enriched by centuries of development. 3. Ancient rivalries must not define Christian-Jewish relations today, Particularly, Christian worship that teaches contempt for Judaism dishonors God. 4, and very significant for our discussion, it affirms the importance of the land of Israel for the life of the Jewish people. These moderate Christians recognize both Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews as legitimate inhabitants of the land. However, they do not explicitly accept a Jewish state, and so avoid commenting on the Jewish right to sovereignty in the historic homeland. While it may be a wise choice to adopt a neutral position in the Arab-Israeli conflict, there are additional reasons why a sacred obligation could not officially affirm the legitimacy of Israel. This view is consistent with the reluctance of the Roman Catholic Church to recognize the legitimacy of the State of Israel as a Jewish state or the validity of the return of Jews to sovereignty and independence. The Vatican opposed the creation of a Jewish state in 1948 and did not engage in official diplomatic relations until 1994. The point is that, like Judaism, Christianity too is divided. We must be very cautious when we are tempted to speak of a generalized Jewish or Christian view concerning claims to the Holy Land.
重要なのは、ユダヤ教同様キリスト教に関しましても意見が分かれているということでありますので、聖地に関する権利についてユダヤ教はこう考える、キリスト教はこう考えるというふうに単純に一般化してはならないということになると思います。
Muslim claims. Since at least 90% of the Arab population between the Jordan and the Mediterranean is Muslim, it is Islam, not Christianity, that primarily concerns Israel. The Jewish state is located in a Muslim world and is engaged in a protracted struggle with it. For Muslims, the entire Middle East encompasses lands endowed with sacred qualities. Palestine comprises only one, although special, entity within the larger rubric of Dar el-Islam, the abode of Islam, and Islamic views of the borders of Palestine have varied over time. Like the Jewish Eretz HaKodesh, or Holy Land, and the Christian Terra Sancta, the Muslim Holy Land is termed Al-Arad ul-Muqaddesha as the connection between religion and state is particularly potent in the Arab-Muslim world. The claim to Palestine, especially to Jerusalem, is both religious and political. While the abode of Islam, Dar el-Islam, can include Jews and Christians as dhimmis, that is, second-class but protected groups, they are forbidden by Islamic law to achieve sovereignty and independence. Yet there are important caveats about how Muslim theology is applied. Jews have been landowners within the Muslim world and have owned various types of lands. Indeed, both Christians and Jews were able to acquire even waqf lands, that is, holy benevolences, intended to support Islam and its institutions at different periods in different places in the Arab-Muslim world. During the first 70 years of Zionist settlement, from around 1880 until the establishment of Israel in 1948, Jews bought considerable lands from Muslims for building their settlements. Even the Mufti, the supreme religious leader of Muslims in Palestine, and his associates sold land to Jews. It is only more recently that this has become impossible, especially in areas where the Hamas, or radical Muslim fundamentalists, rule. Historically, theology and its application have been flexible and pragmatic. The extremism of the present may be exceptional. Consider the Hamas Charter of 1988. Article 11 states, "The land of Palestine is an Islamic waqf for the benefit of Muslims throughout the generations and until the day of resurrection. It is forbidden to abandon it or part with it or to renounce it." End quote. The Charter goes on to declare that Palestine in its entirety is holy Muslim waqf. For the first time in the history of Muslim rule in Palestine, all of Palestine is defined as a sacred waqf territory, and not just the area around the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, where Muhammad is said to have embarked on his night journey. Even land previously defined as purely commercial and open to all is now prohibited to Jews. This is unprecedented. Long-established traditions are being redefined to support current political aims. Contemporary Islamic fanaticism is apparently willing to endure severe retaliation to pursue its objectives. There is little evidence that this extremism is balanced by alternative Islamic movements of comparable power that urge accommodation with the Jewish state. Individuals who espouse more moderate views rarely speak out politically against extremism, since to do so would be to put them at risk. Extremists on the Jewish side represent only one aspect of a diverse contemporary interpretation of Judaism, and they are openly and regularly challenged by moderates who favor compromise and accommodation with Arabs. This asymmetry in the ways Muslims and Jews employ their traditions has exacerbated the conflict and made it difficult to reconcile differences. I will now turn to secular claims. So far, I've tried to show one category of claims to land, those rooted in religion and expressed in theological terms. I argue that these claims tend to be internal, that is, derived from the belief system of the community of believers. I will now consider a second category that I will call external, secular claims used to appeal to those outside the community, as well as co-religionists who hold different views. For reasons of time, I will focus on Jewish secular claims. Because their audience is external, they make use of universal and secular concepts and language. The origin and development of secular arguments for claiming territory is a significant topic that warrants a full lecture on its own. Secular claims were first made in the 18th century as part of the European Enlightenment and were further elaborated in the 19th century with the rise of the nation-state. In other words, secular claims to land are relatively recent in contrast to claims based on divine sanction that have been normative throughout human history. Americans were among those who took the lead in developing secular claims. There were many European claimants to the New World across the Atlantic. Americans who denied the divine rule of kings and had successfully separated church from state invoked the abstract concept of providence to legitimate their nation's movement across the continent, but did not have recourse to a national or even universal deity, including Jesus. As citizens of a modern and secular state, they developed novel theories of legitimacy, as they claimed vast territories from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific and faced the opposition of indigenous peoples, Indians and Mexicans, as well as European competitors, particularly France, Spain, Great Britain, and even Russia. These new theories, legitimating land claims, were concisely articulated by Chief Justice John Marshall of the United States Supreme Court. In the 1830s, when the United States was around 50 years old, Marshall heard a series of cases involving the competing claims of the Cherokee Indians and the state of Georgia in the 1830s. He argued that there were 4 ways people could acquire the rights to land. 1, conquest. 2, purchase. 3, treaty. And 4, investing labor to make the land more productive. In one way or another, his formulations are still employed when the Aborigines in Australia, the Eskimos in Canada, and the Bedouin in the Negev challenge their governments in disputes that are closely monitored by secular international bodies. Appeals outside religion were natural for the United States. Americans were newcomers, not an historic people rooted in the land. There was no covenant, and God had not promised North America as a homeland for the ages. Moreover, following the Enlightenment, a revolutionary shift in popular thought attributed authority to human sanction, not to individuals who claimed to rule by divine right. As occurred in other democratic societies, authority was vested in the will of the people. Democracy became the basis for social and political organization and for legitimacy.